There's a moment towards the end of The Winter Soldier where Captain America, Falcon, and Nick Fury are gathered around the grave of Nick Fury, who had faked his death. On the headstone is a line made famous by Jules Winfield, Samuel L. Jackson's character in Pulp Fiction.
The path of the righteous man is beset on all sides.
It was a fun Easter egg thrown in by the Russo brothers, but it did prompt a bunch of fan theories suggesting that Pulp Fiction might be an origin story for Nick Fury. Someone even asked Quentin Tarantino what he thought of this.
Well, the fact that I grew up with Marvel comic books and, the Marvel universe before it was a cinematic universe. So the fact that all of a sudden my universe was now being quoted inside of as closed a gate as the Marvel Cinematic Universe is felt pretty good.
Well, Quentin, if you liked that, then buckle up because I'm going to do you one better. Because the theory that Jules in Pulp Fiction went on to become Nick Fury got pretty debunked when Captain Marvel gave us Fury's actual origin story. So I have a better theory than that, and I wish it was only about Nick Fury. No, what I'm going to do in this video is ask the question, what if? What if the MCU and the Tarantinoverse did in fact take place in the same timeline? That's right, you are about to witness the Marvel Cinematic Tarantinoverse, a timeline of events and characters taken from both the MCU and from Tarantino's own cinematic universe that line up surprisingly well. By the end of the video, some of you will definitely be thinking,
"You are a sad, strange little man."
But with any luck, you'll also be thinking,
"It makes no damn sense." Compels me though.
And maybe, just maybe, you'll be thinking,
Shit.
One thing I can guarantee is this: you've never seen a fan theory like this before. At least not since I proved The Rock was a James Bond movie. So let's begin with the inevitable disclaimers. The first is that with only 2 exceptions, I won't be referencing information from things like the tie-in comics or any meta-commentary by the filmmakers. This theory is based 100% on information delivered on screen in the movies. The second is that there will be some of this,
Feel, don't think. Use your instincts.
and also a lot of this.
Okay, so I decided, oh shit, buddy, I gotta dig a little deeper.
So be prepared for that. The third is that there will be varying levels of spoilers for these movies. Finally, this is just a fun fan theory presented by a cartoon penguin, so maybe don't take it too seriously. Okay, so let's start by explaining what the Quentin Tarantino cinematic universe is. I know I literally just said that I wouldn't be relying on meta commentary by the filmmakers in this video, but I also said there were 2 exceptions. This is the first, and it's kind of necessary to explain what the Tarantinoverse is. It's pretty widely known that Quentin Tarantino has said all of his films share a common universe, established by connections like the recurrence of Red Apple cigarettes, and Mr. Blonde in Reservoir Dogs and Vince Vega in Pulp Fiction being brothers. But what's less well known is that there are in fact 2 Tarantino universes, the realer than real universe and the movie universe. The realer than real universe covers most of Tarantino's films, which all take place in the same fictional timeline and are canonically connected. The movie universe films are fictional movies made within that fictional timeline. So when, say, Vince Vega goes to the cinema, he's watching movies like Kill Bill and Death Proof. Jackie Brown isn't part of either universe because it's an adapted screenplay from a novel, so I'm also discounting it from this video. But here's where I need to return to what's established through on-screen continuity, and put to one side things Tarantino himself has said. In this video, I am only considering the original movies written and directed by Tarantino to be part of the Tarantinoverse. So in this theory, the movies that Tarantino wrote but didn't direct, like Natural Born Killers and True Romance, take place in a divergent timeline where Nick Fury is a gangster and Tony Stark is an Australian tabloid journalist.
I mean, how can you bring yourself to do that?
I know Tarantino has said that there are connections like Floyd and True Romance being related to Aldo and Inglourious Basterds, but this information is never delivered on screen, and there are too many continuity issues for all of these films to actually be part of Tarantino's self-described universe. For example, Christopher Walken would somehow have to be both a military veteran in Pulp Fiction and a mafia boss in True Romance. So for this video, the non-Tarantino directed movies all take place in alternate timelines, just like the non-MCU Marvel movies like X-Men and Fantastic Four. Right, so with that out of the way, we can begin the timeline of the Marvel Cinematic Tarantinoverse, or MCTV. We start in World War II. In the Tarantinoverse, World War II ended in 1944 when the Inglourious Basterds kill Hitler during Operation Kino. Now, the MCU also establishes an alternate history of World War II by showing things like the Hydra campaigns led by the Red Skull. It also never explicitly says the war ended in 1945. I know Zola says this,
"I may not be the man I was when the captain took me prisoner in 1945.
But the same movie also says that Bucky died in 1944, even though these events took place on the same day. So I'm I'm going to believe the Smithsonian rather than a Hydra robot. So anyway, in the MCTV, Cap's strike on Hydra was intentionally timed to coincide with Operation Kino by the Allied command, to guarantee that both Hydra and the Nazi High Command would be defeated together. So the war ends a year early in 1944. But wait, isn't Daniel Bruhl in Inglourious Basterds? Doesn't he also play Zemo in the MCU? How can this be? I'm glad you asked. Daniel Bruhl is indeed in both universes. In Inglourious Basterds, he plays a Nazi war hero turned propaganda movie star called Frederick Zola. Zola? Wait, that sounds familiar.
Are you ready, Dr. Zola?
He even makes this quip when we first meet him.
Vous êtes le fils de quelqu'un?
La plupart des soldats allemands sont fils de quelqu'un.
What if he wasn't just being humble here? What if his father was in fact a highly respected Nazi scientist? This might explain why Zola's story got the attention of the Nazi High Command in the first place. His well-connected father put in a word for him. And before you put in the comments that Zola is Swiss, I know, but that doesn't stop his son from having been born in Germany, where his father has clearly worked for decades. But hang on, the names are spelled differently. Well, that's simple. In 1943, Zola Sr. helped the Red Skull betray the Nazis. He would have been branded a traitor, and Goebbels would have wanted nothing more to do with him. But by this time, Captain America was on the scene and the Nazis were losing the propaganda war in a big way. They needed a super soldier of their own, so they took Zola Jr.'s story and turned it into a propaganda piece, one that says the Nazis don't need a super soldier, every Nazi is a super soldier. To avoid association with Zola's exiled father, they changed the spelling of his name on the posters. It also explains why he dodges Shoshana's question about his parentage. Now, you might think that Toby Jones and Daniel Bruhl don't exactly look alike. That's fair, but there are times in Civil War, for instance, where the physical similarities suddenly become apparent. But this still doesn't explain why Zemo in the 21st century looks like Zola's son in 1944. Well, here's where we're going to get a little bit into this territory.
Okay, so I decided, oh shit, buddy, I gotta dig a little deeper.
Helmut Zemo in the MCU is part of an aristocratic Sokovian family.
I'm a baron's son. My family was royalty until your friends destroyed my country.
But besides this, the closest thing the MCU has to a backstory for the Zemo family is the PS3 game Captain America Super Soldier. So this is the second and last time I will reference non-cinematic material in this video, because while I could just make it up, trust me when I say that this version is better. Even though this game isn't strictly canon, I'm using it because most of its voice cast is actually the same as the movies, including Chris Evans as Cap, so there is a strong continuity with the films. Anyway, this game establishes that the Red Skull and Zola befriend Helmut Zemo's grandfather, Baron Heinrich Zemo, and set up a base in his castle in Sokovia. If you want to tie this into the films even more, this map in the first Avenger clearly shows a Hydra base here, which is about the same location Sokovia is shown as being in Civil War. So the canon MCU films do suggest that the Red Skull and Zola could have made it to Sokovia in the course of their campaign. Now, Zemo the Elder isn't seen on screen in the game, but Cap retrieves his diaries throughout the mission. They tell us that Zemo agreed to let Zola help him on a mysterious pet project called Adhesive X. Now, at the time, Zola was working on genetic research for Hydra, trying to build a super soldier army in Zemo's castle. So what could Zemo's personal project be that he asked for Zola's help on? It's simple. He wanted an heir. The diaries clearly establish how obsessed Zemo was with his family history, but never mention a wife or children. What if Zemo was unable to produce an heir, and Adhesive X was his attempt to make one artificially? Seeing Zola's expertise in genetic research, he sought the help of the scientist. Zola determines that the only way to produce an heir will be to use other DNA, and Zola offers his own as a substitute for Baron Zemo's. This explains why Helmut Zemo looks like Zola's other son, and also explains why Zemo himself is such a genius. He shares Zola's intellect. As for Zola's motive for doing this, well, it's clear from the Winter Soldier that he was obsessed with preserving his mind, if not his body. Now, Zola's plans of course get disrupted by Captain America, but Baron Zemo and his new bloodline lived on into the 21st century. So to recap, the timeline of the Marvel Cinematic Tarantinoverse begins during an alternate version of World War II, where Captain America and Frederick Zola are making competing propaganda movies, Arnim Zola is using his expertise to make Baron Zemo an heir, and the Inglourious Basterds kill Nazi High Command in 1944, ending the war a year earlier than in real life. So now that we've established the key point at which the MCTV timeline diverges from our own, let's skip ahead to Nick Fury and Pulp Fiction. Like I said at the start of this video, there are versions of this theory that essentially say that Jules Winfield reforms at the end of Pulp Fiction, then goes on to join S.H.I.E.L.D. as Nick Fury. After all, they do share a fondness for a particular word.
English, mother, working.
Well done.
But if this theory got debunked by Captain Marvel, then why does Nick Fury use the same Bible verse on his tombstone that Jules said in Pulp Fiction, especially considering the fact that this quote never actually appears anywhere in the Bible? Well, because there's nothing in the MCU to suggest that the Bible is different to the one in our universe, only explanation is that Jules and Fury are the same person using the same false quote. But how can they be the same person when we've just established that it was impossible for Jules to go on to become Nick Fury? Well, the answer is simple. Jules Winfield did not go on to become Nick Fury. Jules Winfield is Nick Fury, working as an undercover spy. See, in Captain Marvel, Fury says he was a soldier, then became a spy.
First job?
Soldier, straight out of high school.
Then?
Spy.
Where?
It's the Cold War, we were everywhere.
It's established that Fury worked all over the world, so by the late 1980s he would have been getting on a bit after a full military and espionage career. He probably fancied something a bit closer to home, so he returns to the CIA's Los Angeles office and is tasked to infiltrate the inner circle of crime boss Marcellus Wallace. It's easy enough for him to adopt the Jules Winfield disguise and become a hitman, a suitable occupation for someone with a military background. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking about Fury's ID badge in Captain Marvel that says he joined S.H.I.E.L.D. in 1988, so how could he still be a CIA spy in Pulp Fiction, which came out in 1994? Well, my eagle-eyed viewer, Pulp Fiction was made in 1994, but the film is intentionally vague about the year in which it is set. The best indication we have is Wolf's car, a Honda Acura NSX, which was launched in 1989. But remember, this is the MCU where Howard Stark has been showing off hovercars since the 1940s. The MCU is much more technologically advanced than our universe, so it's plausible such a car could be developed and launched a few years earlier. So let's say Pulp Fiction is set in early 1988, which is about 6 years before Captain Marvel and also long enough for Fury's baldness to start setting in. While undercover, Fury miraculously survives a gun being unloaded on him. As we see in the movie, this gives him quite a revelation. He sees it as divine intervention and he decides to quit. After years of living on the front line, this miracle showed him how close he came to losing everything. He needs to do something different, something safer, something like a desk job.
Now.
Been riding a desk for the past 6 years, trying to figure out where our future enemies are coming from.
See, when we last see Jules, he says he's going to walk the earth until
God puts me where he wants me to be.
So Jules delivers the case to Marcellus, breaks his cover, and quits the CIA to find some deeper purpose. Well, that purpose comes in the form of S.H.I.E.L.D. After all, we establish in Captain Marvel that Fury works for S.H.I.E.L.D.'s office in Los Angeles, the same city that the events of Pulp Fiction take place in. So Fury is already in proximity to the S.H.I.E.L.D. office he would go on to join. But as for the question of why S.H.I.E.L.D. wanted to hire Fury in the first place, well, the answer to that lies in the case.
We happy? Vincent! We happy? Yeah, we happy.
One of the biggest mysteries of the Tarantinoverse is the question of what is inside the mysterious case that Jules and Vincent are tasked to retrieve for Marcellus Wallace. Is it drugs? Diamonds? Is it Marcellus's soul? Well, no, it's an Infinity Stone, the Mind Stone to be exact. After all, the MCU never establishes on screen where Thanos got the Mind Stone. We first see it embedded into the scepter that Thanos gave Loki in the Avengers. But where did Thanos get it? Well, he got it how he planned to get many of the other Infinity Stones, by using someone else. In the Guardians of the Galaxy, we see how he hired Yondu's Ravager gang to retrieve the Soul Stone. Well, what if he hired another Ravager clan to go to Earth and find the Mind Stone? What if he hired, say, a Ravager clan headed by Charlie 27? Look familiar? Of course he does, because it's Marcellus Wallace. He may be wearing Earth clothes here, but the man still loves his yellow. This also explains the mystery of the plaster on the back of Marcellus's head. It's covering the mark from where his Universal Translator chip was inserted, which the Guardians films establish as being implanted in the neck. So Charlie 27 leads his Ravager gang onto Earth to find the Mind Stone, and adopts the guise of crime boss Marcellus Wallace as cover for their search. Because they want to stay discreet and lots of the Ravager gang are visibly alien, Marcellus needs to hire some humans like Jules and Vincent to do the legwork. By this time, S.H.I.E.L.D. would have picked up on the fact that there may be aliens lurking around Los Angeles, so they follow the trail until they find Fury. After hearing about what happened to him, they determined that this miracle would in fact have been the influence of the Mind Stone. To someone who thought he just witnessed a miracle, I think it would have been very appealing to have proof that there was indeed a greater power in the universe. Fury decides he has found his god's purpose and joins S.H.I.E.L.D. So we've connected Nick Fury to Pulp Fiction, but we're not done. Let's go back to the case for a second. Remember how Marcellus runs a crime gang? Well, what if, when he finally learnt the location of the Infinity Stone, he put together a group of criminals to steal it? What if the characters in Reservoir Dogs are in fact all working for Marcellus Wallace? For starters, it explains why they dress the same as his other employees in Pulp Fiction. I know Joe puts the gang together in Dogs, but it's clear someone was pulling the strings behind the scenes.
I don't know nobody that can move ice.
No problem, we got guys waiting for it.
He's talking about Marcellus here. Now Joe thinks they're going to steal
shipment of polished stones from Israel.
But Marcellus knows that this particular diamond delivery is in fact the Mind Stone. After all, we never see the diamonds in Reservoir Dogs, we only see the case, and at the end of the movie, Mr. Pink runs off with it. So let's say he stashes it at Brett's apartment, and Brett decides not to tell Marcellus that he has the stolen case, explaining this comment.
I just want you to know how sorry we are that things got so fucked up with us and Mr. Wallace.
This is why Marcellus sends Jules and Vincent to retrieve the case. The reason I make this connection is because if Reservoir Dogs and Pulp Fiction do share the same universe as Quentin Tarantino claims, then it stands to reason that the recurring actors in the films are playing the same characters. Now you might point out that Mr. Brown and Mr. White die in Dogs, but do they? Brown isn't necessarily dead here, he's just passed out from a loss of blood.
I'm not dead! Yeah. He said he's not dead.
He could have survived and then settled down in suburbia after having such a near-death experience. As for how Mr. White survived Reservoir Dogs to become Winston Wolfe, we'll come to that in a moment. But first we need to talk about Tim Roth, who appears in Reservoir Dogs as Mr. Orange and Pulp Fiction as Pumpkin. This is another annoying example of Tarantino saying his films are connected even though he casts the same actors in completely different roles. Like, Roth is an American cop in Dogs, while in Pulp Fiction he's a British criminal. But our question is, how can this all be the same person who tried to defeat Bruce Banner 20 odd years later as Emil Blonsky, aka the Abomination? Oh, did you forget about the Incredible Hulk? To be honest, I kind of hoped you had, but for better or worse, this movie is still MCU canon and we've come this far, so let's do this. Well, the connection to Pulp Fiction is clear. We never learn Pumpkin's real name, but his accent certainly matches Blonsky's in the Incredible Hulk.
Restaurants on the other end, you catch with their pants down.
You're gonna have a lot of professional tough guys pissing in their pants.
Now in Pulp Fiction, he attempts to rob Jules, aka Nick Fury. This is how that goes.
$1,500. Okay, put it in your pocket. It's yours. Now, I ain't giving it to him, Vincent. I'm buying something for my money. Wanna know what I'm buying, Ringo? What? Your life.
So after this experience, Blonsky uses the money to return home to England and join the Royal Marines. If Pulp Fiction did take place in 1988, this gives him a solid 20 years or so in the military, long enough to justify this remark in The Hulk.
You should be a colonel by now.
More importantly, this scene explains Blonsky's obsession with power and winning. Being humiliated by Jules made him feel powerless, so he became a soldier to never feel that sort of weakness again. And he didn't, until Hulk came along. That's why it drives him so crazy. So the Pulp Fiction MCU connection is clear here. As for Reservoir Dogs, well, that's actually more straightforward than you'd expect, because Mr. Orange isn't the same person as Blonsky. Remember how I said S.H.I.E.L.D. was tracking Marcellus? Well, Orange isn't an undercover cop, he's an undercover S.H.I.E.L.D. agent tasked with sabotaging the heist so that S.H.I.E.L.D. could stop the Infinity Stone falling into Marcellus's hands. As for his appearance, well, the S.H.I.E.L.D. agent is simply using a photostatic veil to disguise himself as a criminal. They probably just picked a random mugshot from the LAPD files to help him look the part, and to protect his true identity. This explains why Mr. Orange has no tattoos at all, while Blonsky's tattoos match Pumpkin's. Oh, before you point out the fact that Mr. Orange has a Silver Surfer poster on his wall and calls Joe the Thing, well, the Fantastic Four don't yet exist in the MCU, so for all we know, this is just a comic series that exists in the Marvel Cinematic Tarantinoverse. Anyway, when Mr. White shoots Orange in the head at the end of Dogs, he would destroy the photostatic veil. S.H.I.E.L.D. cuts a deal not to arrest him if he keeps his mouth shut about seeing such advanced technology. White agrees and goes back to working for Marcellus as Winston Wolfe. Now, White worked with Mr. Brown on the Dogs heist, during which time they were sworn to secrecy. So look at this moment in Pulp Fiction when they meet again.
You're Jimmy, right? This is your house?
There's a moment of hesitancy and recognition before Wolfe speaks. They recognize each other, but they both know they can't acknowledge it. Quentin Tarantino and Harvey Keitel here are playing the same characters in Reservoir Dogs as they are in Pulp Fiction. Still with me? Probably not, but if you are, this feels like a good time to recap everything. In World War II, Arnim Zola's son Frederick becomes a war hero, and is championed as a Nazi super soldier to rival the propaganda films of Captain America. Zola Sr. meanwhile is holed up in Sokovia and uses his expertise in genetics to make Zemo an heir, one who would grow up to share Zola's intellect and the appearance of his son, but bear the Zemo family name. Captain America meanwhile defeats the Red Skull at the same time the Inglourious Basterds defeat the Nazi High Command, ending the war in 1944. Decades later, Thanos hires Ravager gang Charlie 27 to find the Mind Stone on Earth. The Ravager boss adopts the disguise of Marcellus Wallace, and after learning the stone's whereabouts, he recruits a gang of criminals to steal it. S.H.I.E.L.D. finds out about this too, so sends an agent in undercover, disguised with a photostatic veil. The heist goes wrong, so Wallace sends his 2 crack hitmen to retrieve the case. One of these hitmen is Nick Fury, the CIA's own undercover agent inside Marcellus's criminal empire. After miraculously surviving being shot, Fury decides to quit frontline work. Along the way, Emil Blonsky attempts to rob him, but is beaten and left embarrassed and powerless. He joins the military and goes on to become a power-hungry soldier who has to win at all costs. Meanwhile, S.H.I.E.L.D. recruit Fury by explaining that the divine intervention he witnessed was in fact the work of the Mind Stone. He truly does go on to become the shepherd and the finder of lost children. So there you have it, an alternate timeline of events of the 20th century that perfectly line up the MCU with the Tarantinoverse. Every shared character and piece of alternate history lines up and provides a cohesive narrative that answers the question, what if Quentin Tarantino's films take place in the MCU? What if the Marvel Cinematic Tarantinoverse could exist? Thank you for watching, don't forget to subscribe and wait, what?
Hey! What's up, babe?
What?
My name is Ego.
What?
No one said the job's supposed to be easy.
Oh, are you freaking kidding me? Actually, you know what? I can make this work. Kurt Russell appears in 3 Tarantino films, Death Proof, The Hateful Eight, and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Meanwhile, in the MCU, Kurt Russell plays Ego, a small G god and Peter Quill's father. Ego adopted a humanoid form and went to Earth in the 1980s, where he met Quill's mother. So our question is, why does this Celestial look like this guy in the Tarantinoverse? Well, the answer is weirdly meta. See, in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, Kurt Russell plays a stunt coordinator called Randy, while in The Hateful Eight, he plays the hangman John Ruth. Now, both of these movies take place in the realer-than-real universe, which means they exist in the same timeline that we've just established for the MCTV. Because The Hateful Eight takes place 200 years before the 1960s, we can say that Ruth is simply an ancestor of the modern-day Randy. The same goes for Tim Roth's character, as well as Samuel L. Jackson in both The Hateful Eight and Django Unchained. But Russell's other Tarantino appearance is as Stuntman Mike in Death Proof. Now, Death Proof is a movie universe film, which means even within the Tarantinoverse, its events are fictional. So logically, an actor exists in the realer-than-real universe who plays Stuntman Mike in the fictional movie Death Proof. Let's say that fictional actor got their start in the movie business through their father, who was a well-connected figure in the movie industry in the 1960s. If that sounds like someone you know, that someone is Kurt Russell. So in the timeline of the MCTV, Randy's son goes on to have an acting career that closely resembled the career of the real-life Kurt Russell. Maybe in this universe, Randy Jr. became just as famous as Kurt Russell after starring in John Carpenter's The Thing or taking on iconic roles like Snake Plissken. He then grows up to play Stuntman Mike in the fictional movie Death Proof as a tribute to his father. But how does this connect back to Ego? Well, in the Guardians of the Galaxy, we established that Quill used to carry around a picture of David Hasselhoff and pretend that was his father, being a fan of 80s TV shows like Knight Rider. Ego knows this as well because he says this to Quill.
I tried so hard to find the form that best suited you.
Now this shows that Ego can change his form to whatever he wants, and since he had to base his human appearance off someone, and he knew he couldn't actually be Hasselhoff, instead he chose another 80s actor, but one who Quill wouldn't know because he was mostly known for adult films, not a kids TV show. You see where I'm going with this, right? Ego in the Marvel Cinematic Tarantinoverse is intentionally taking the form of the actor Randy Jr. See, Ego knows Quill has a childlike memory of Earth grounded in the 1980s, so if you're trying to find a form that best suits your 80s obsessed child, why not pick another iconic 80s actor? After all, neither Quill nor any of the Guardians would have any idea who this human actor was, so Ego could appear to be a Hasselhoff-like father figure to Quill without having to worry about being recognized as Hasselhoff. As for why he looked like that on Earth, well, Quill's mother knows he's an alien, and I have to keep it PG here, but let's just say that dating a shape-shifting alien would allow you to get pretty creative. Whew. Okay, are we done? I think we're done. Shit. Like I said at the start, this was just a bit of fun to see if a cohesive timeline could be made by combining the MCU and the Tarantinoverse, and you know what? I think it's pretty good. If you enjoyed it, then please let me and the algorithm know by subscribing, and I'll see you next time.